Howdy, lads. As you may or may not know, Australia has a rocky history with wars on terrestrial life. But despite their current track record, they've taken to the waters to wage war on one of the most disgusting fish in the world, the carp. And with half a century of trying a series of increasingly insane plans to wipe the fish out, I can firmly say the war is not going well. Why do they want to wipe out the carp, my hypothetical viewer might ask? Well, for starters, the carp are an invasive species. In the 1960s, a strain of problematic European carp managed to escape a fish farm and enter Australian waters. These guys were optimized for one thing and one thing only: breeding. The sheer rate at which they reproduced made rats look like pandas. Just one female carp lays over 1 million eggs on a bad year and over 3 million on a good year. So it wasn't long after their jailbreak that Australia's waters became 90% carp. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. In parts of Australia, 90% of the aquatic biomass is just carp, and you better believe that comes with a whole slew of fun side effects. One of the most problematic of these effects is that carp make it borderline impossible for anything to grow thanks to how they feed. They scour the riverbed for crustaceans, insects, or plant matter by sucking up big gulps of mud and sifting for anything edible before spitting it out, which completely trashes the soil, making it super hard for plants to grow. Of course, this doesn't bother the carp, they could eat practically anything. But for the plants and animals that need, like, nutrients to survive, it is catastrophic. So clearly carp are a big problem. So what was Australia's genius plan for taking them out? Oi mate, nature will figure it out. Let's go play cricket. That's terrible. Their first plan was to hope nature just figures it out on its own. And I mean, it's not the worst idea. With hundreds of millions of large, meaty fish swimming around, you would expect a predator to capitalize on all that free food. Well, Australia forgot evolution takes, like, a long time. So the predators in Australia haven't really had time to figure out how to hunt carp effectively. Plus, carp grow to full adulthood over the course of only 1 year, and weigh around 20 pounds or 9 kilos fully grown. So they're just too large for any predators to effectively cull their numbers. It's not like introducing a new predator is a good idea either. They learned their lesson with that the hard way after introducing the cane toad to deal with beetles, which was a disaster. So I really doubt they're too keen on going for round 2. So, animals won't help. On to plan 2. The power of the open market. Surely, with all that free, cheap fish around, a company could mass fish them for profit. Or citizens would fish them up for a cheap meal. Nope, no, not at all. Some Australian companies have taken to harvesting carp for a couple reasons, but food sure as hell isn't one of them. Thanks to the carp's mud-sucking diet, anecdotally, they taste disgusting, making it nearly impossible to make any business out of selling them for food. The government has put out propaganda to convince people that carp can be eaten, but nobody seems to care. I looked into it, and every post I found talking about carp positively was like, yeah, it's really good. All you have to do is keep it alive in your bath for a couple days to flush out the mud, and it almost tastes normal. Yeah, it's also filled with like a lot of tiny bones that are really hard to pick out. But other than that, it's delicious. So it seems the odds of carp making a culinary comeback anytime soon are slim. The main thing carp get used for is just to blend them up and put them in fertilizer. Seriously, that's the best they can do. They are virtually worthless for anything else. There's only so much fertilizer one needs to make, so mass fishing from private companies has been a complete failure. That leaves private citizens. Most Australians absolutely hate carp, so they try to pitch in. Communities will occasionally run carp catching competitions to help cull their numbers. But very few people in Australia want to catch carp for any practical reasons, so it's just not done often enough to keep their numbers down. So we can scratch that one off the list too. After doing their best to ignore the problem out of existence, the Australian government finally stepped in with Plan 3, spawn killing. Once a year during spawning season, carp from all around Australia gather in certain locations to lay their eggs. Usually, this is shallow, flowing water with some mild to moderate vegetation. Scientists captured a few carp and implanted tracking chips on them to locate these spawning waters and put up barriers along the most common routes to prevent them from getting there. This would hypothetically prevent the carp from spawning at all. A genius plan, really. and then the carp just jumped over the barriers. But they still knew where the carp were going to lay their eggs, so that's something. One way they hoped to do this was by taking a female carp, injecting her with excessive pheromones, and then putting her in a cage to attract male fish, at which point they could catch all the males. But what they didn't consider is there were millions of females swimming around at all times, so why would the males have any reason to go to the one in the cage just because she smells nice? So the scientists went, what if we electrocute them? Or blast them with sound waves? Yeah. Of all things, that actually worked, kind of. By mimicking the sounds of flowing water or female carp, they could actually control where the carp went. This was really effective in isolated communities, as it meant they pretty much knew where the carp were at all times. Then, fishermen could come in with electrofishing. Essentially, this is when they stun everything in the water in a small area. They see which fish are carp and just take those while leaving the other fish alone. This did wonders for smaller bodies of water isolated from the rest of Australia, but unfortunately it didn't do much in the bigger bodies of water. So Australia still had bigger fish to fry. Get it? Fry fish? Let's move on. Combining all the previous methods did help cut down on the population size for about one season. Afterwards, it would resurge to numbers sometimes higher than they had ever been. And it became clear all of these suckers needed to be taken out in one fell swoop, lest they come back stronger the next year. That's when Australia said screw it. Plan 4, bioweapon time. Carp are incredibly durable fish, that's like the whole problem. So introducing something into the environment capable of wiping them out would likely kill just about every living thing in the area, including people. That didn't stop them from brainstorming though. The first idea for this would be to introduce genetically altered carp into the population to contaminate their genes and force them to only give birth to males. If successful, it would likely cause the population to crash over the course of a couple years. Initial tests on the zebrafish, a close relative of the carp, were successful, and they were able to curse a few fish to only produce male offspring. Then they moved on to phase 2, running out of money before actually testing on carp. From what I found, every scientist who worked on this project thought it was promising, but the government disagreed, and cut funding to instead fund a much scarier sounding solution, giving them all herpes. Let me explain. Most species of carp catch cyprinid herpes virus 3, or carp herpes. We're calling it carp herpes. It is highly contagious and kills infected carp in around 2 weeks, sometimes only a few days. So Australia figured, why not just give all the carp herpes? I mean, the rest of the world's carp already catch it, so it's probably no big deal. That honestly might be the case. But as you may have learned in history class, introducing a new virus to a population that has never interacted with it before can have some disastrous consequences. Scientists think the virus won't have any interaction with other aquatic creatures in Australia, but they don't know it won't. The variability is amplified by the fact it would be infecting 200 million carp, giving it plenty of opportunity to mutate and potentially infect other fish. If the plan does work, it will effectively wipe out 80% of the current carp population in less than a year, and cripple the species. Which sounds fantastic, but you have to remember that's 160 million carp corpses floating around in Australian waters, which would cause massive problems on their own. Not only is that just absolutely disgusting, but the oxygen released from the decomposing corpses could cause the water to become toxic, potentially devastating the entire ecosystem even worse than when the carp were alive. There are some ideas that could mitigate this though. For example, targeting the carp while they're spawning to kill them as juveniles and lower the volume of dead fish, or having boats sent out to collect the fish after the virus is released. Operation Carp Herpes is being heavily considered by Australia, and it seems they plan on releasing the virus into the waters sometime in the next few years. But the plan has run into quite a few problems along the way. Not everyone is too keen on the idea of putting a virus in the waters that may or may not destroy everything, so the plan has plenty of political opposition. Plus, this carp herpes project started in 2016 and was only given a budget of $15 million, which I'm pretty sure is less than some Mr. Beast videos. So we'll see if anything actually comes of it, or if it just goes the way of other plans and runs out of money. So that's where the war is today. Make your predictions in the comments now, folks. Will Australia lose a war to fish? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you liked it. I'll see you lads next time.